The grand ballroom buzzed with the scent of luxury and the thrum of ambition, an electric current of unspoken rules woven into every glance and gesture. At the center of this glittering constellation stood Julian Mercer, a man who didn't just bend the rules. He erased them and drafted his own. Tonight he unveiled his boldest revision yet, a breathtaking young intern named Liana on his arm. She was more than a date. She was a symbol of power, of conquest, of unapologetic confidence. Julian believed his pregnant wife Camille was safely sidelined, a silent footnote in his rise to the top. But Camille was about to prove that the sharpest minds are the ones you never see coming. She wasn't showing up to weep. She was arriving to reclaim. The annual gala of Stratus Ventures wasn't merely a party. It was a coronation. A celebration of Julian Mercer, the brilliant founder and CEO whose meteoric rise had become legend. This year, the event took place in the gleaming, angular halls of the MoMA in Midtown Manhattan, a venue as sleek and provocative as Julian himself. The guest list read like the front page of Forbes. Venture capital magnates, hedge fund legends, and the city's power brokers, all moving through the space like exotic creatures in an illuminated ocean. Light from the suspended crystal sculptures caught on diamond earrings and the glossy sheen of Rolex skydwellers. Champagne, vintage and extravagant, flowed freely. And at the epicenter, Julian stood, 41 years old and untouchable, in his custom Zegna tux. His charisma was a weapon, smiling as he built empires or ended careers. With a net worth touching 10 figures, a penthouse overlooking Central Park, and a resume of accolades that earned him headlines, Julian Mercer had it all. He also had a wife, Dr. Camille Alden, a woman whose calm brilliance stood in perfect contrast to his roaring charm. But tonight, Camille wasn't seen. The official explanation, shared in hushed tones by senior executives and their couture-clad partners, was that her high-risk pregnancy, now in its 8th month, demanded strict bed rest. It sounded reasonable, gentle even. They imagined her tucked into their penthouse suite, serene and glowing, the picture of patient devotion. The goddess waiting at home. It was a lie Julian had carefully orchestrated. The serene image was a fabrication, one Julian had constructed with deliberate care. The truth was, Camille hadn't even been invited. Their marriage, once a symphony of intellect and ambition, had deteriorated into a cold war waged in the cavernous quiet of their penthouse. To Julian, Camille's pregnancy wasn't a miracle. It was ballast. Her body, once magnetic and desired, had become a mere vessel. Her brilliance, once the secret edge that sharpened his climb, now felt like a threat to his dominance. He began to treat her like a fragile, decorative relic, something to admire from afar, but never truly engage with. He had convinced himself she was delicate. He had forgotten. She was forged, not in fragility, but in fire. Camille, a behavioral economist with a PhD from Yale, had once lit up think tanks and advisory boards. Years ago, she chose a quieter path, one designed to support Julian's meteoric rise. She had a gift for decoding people, reading the twitches of a brow, the timing of a breath, the faintest inflection of deception. For years, she had been Julian's edge, his strategist in the shadows. But as Stratus Ventures grew, so did Julian's ego, ballooning until there was no room left for her counsel. She had gone from co-architect of his empire to an inconvenient ornament, and into that growing void stepped Liana Dre. Liana was 23, a marketing intern with ocean blue eyes and a firecracker ambition that made her impossible to ignore. She was a reflection of the man Julian had once been, of the fire he feared he was losing. She looked at him with pure, unfiltered reverence, the kind Camille's seasoned eyes could no longer replicate. To Julian, Liana wasn't just a lover, she was proof. Proof that he still had it, that he was still the bold innovator, not a man approaching 40, shackled by responsibility. Tonight was Liana's unspoken debut. Bringing her to the gala wasn't just bold, it was reckless, a blatant violation of the unspoken codes of his world. But Julian had never feared risk. His success had been built on it. He craved the rush, the sense that he could manipulate fate and escape unscathed. He believed his status made him untouchable. He believed Camille, hidden away and swollen with child, was powerless. It was his gravest miscalculation. From his vantage at the carved marble bar, Julian scanned the glittering room like a monarch surveying his domain. 2 champagne flutes chilled in his hands. He waited, heart steady with confidence, for Liana to return from the powder room. The knight felt invincible. Everyone in the room revolved around him, some in admiration, others in envy, all in quiet submission. Julian knew it. He fed on it. And tonight, he would unveil a new star in his constellation, one he shaped with precision. This was his universe, and every orbit obeyed his gravity. Liana Dre stepped out of the powder room like a cinematic reveal, a ripple in the air. The crimson silk of her gown sliced through the sea of charcoal, navy, and silver like a defiant flare. The dress gripped her youthful frame, a stark counterpoint to the soft, rounded grace of the woman she was meant to replace. She wore her beauty like an unspoken promise, untouched, temporary, irresistible. As she wove her way through the elite and the powerful, her expression danced between wide-eyed wonder and carefully calculated confidence. She was performing, and she was performing flawlessly. Julian's eyes found her instantly. His trademark smile unfolded like a signature only she could read. He intercepted her halfway, offering her a flute of champagne. "There you are," he murmured, his tone low and rich, intimate but loud enough for curious ears nearby. "I was starting to think you'd left me." "Never, Julian," Liana whispered, brushing his arm lightly with her fingertips. The gesture, small, intimate, unmistakably familiar, sent a ripple of stunned silence through the executives within view. This was Liana Dre, the intern, the girl who arranged meetings and fetched espresso, and she was touching the CEO like she belonged to him. Julian drank in the room's reaction, each slack jaw and widened eye a silent triumph. This was the moment. He led Liana on a slow, controlled loop through the ballroom, like a collector parading his most prized artifact. He didn't introduce her as a lover. That would be too crude. No, the deception was far more refined, wrapped in the glossy veneer of mentorship. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Liana Dre," Julian announced to a circle of stone-faced executives. "She's one of our brightest up-and-comers in marketing, a real star in the making. I've taken her under my wing. It's part of our commitment to cultivating future leaders at Stratus." The executives, seasoned professionals with families, mortgages, and careers tethered to Julian's approval, nodded politely. They forced smiles, their expressions tight with the weight of implication. They saw his hand settle at the small of Liana's back, the quiet possessiveness in his gaze, the soft flush in her cheeks. They knew the truth, even if it wore the costume of mentorship. And they said nothing. Complicity, after all, was the currency of survival. Just a few feet away, Serena Dre, head of legal and notorious for her razor wit, watched the performance with open disdain. She'd known Julian for over a decade. She'd crafted the airtight contracts that armored his empire, and she had been there the day he married Camille. She considered Camille a friend, or as close to one as her guarded temperament allowed. Now her eyes found Michael Fong, the CFO, who perpetually looked like he'd slept in his office chair, and for good reason. Michael's face was a collage of alarm and calculation, each tick of his jaw measuring the fallout. A scandal this public could send investors into a panic and cost the company millions in market value. "He's completely lost it," Serena muttered, swallowing a stiff sip of her gin martini. "This isn't impulsive," Michael whispered back, adjusting his glasses with a shaky hand. "This is corporate suicide." "He's not thinking," Serena corrected sharply. "He's feeling. And right now, he feels invincible." Julian, either unaware or wholly indifferent to their disapproval, pressed forward in his showcase. He introduced Liana to a high-ranking member of the city council, a tech influencer with a global following, and a visiting venture capitalist from Hong Kong. With each encounter, his confidence swelled. The flattery toward Liana became more lavish, the space between their bodies more intimate. Julian was drunk, not on alcohol, but on his own audacity. He was crafting a story live and unfiltered, a bold rewrite where he was the visionary unchained, free from convention, and untethered from the woman waiting in silent exile at home. Liana, for her part, was swept away by the storm. This was the world she had fantasized about. Men she'd seen on magazine covers were now shaking her hand, nodding thoughtfully as she spoke, whether or not they were actually listening. She stood next to power incarnate, basking in its glow. And in that warmth, she missed the warning signs. Julian's recklessness looked, to her, like strength. His arrogance, like confidence. She thought she was on the brink of everything she had ever wanted. The peak of the evening, and the nadir of Julian's judgment, came with the sharp clink of silver on glass. He tapped the edge of his champagne flute, commanding the room's attention. The low hum of conversation ebbed into stillness. Liana stood beside him, her hand laced with his. Around them, colleagues, clients, board members, all eyes now riveted. "My friends," Julian began, his voice smooth and sure, the cadence of a seasoned orator. "Thank you for being here tonight to celebrate another remarkable year at Stratus Ventures." He paused, letting the gravity settle. "We've shattered records, broken barriers, and proven time and again why we are leaders in innovation. But success is about more than numbers. It's about people. It's about nurturing brilliance and believing in the future." His eyes dropped to Liana, his expression softening into something that feigned paternal pride, but convinced no one. "It's about discovering the rare few who carry within them the spark, the drive, the clarity to shape the future," Julian continued, lifting his glass. "So let's raise a toast, not just to what we've accomplished, but to what's still to come. To innovation, to risk, to daring ideas, and to the luminous talents that will light our path forward." He squeezed Liana's hand. "To the future." "To the future," the crowd echoed, a dissonant mix of admiration, jealousy, and barely concealed contempt. The toast, though couched in corporate language, was unmistakable in its real intent. It was a veiled tribute to his own betrayal, a brazen blessing over his affair, delivered in front of his peers, mentors, and subordinates, a masterclass in arrogance. Julian drank deeply from his glass, the champagne fizzing with the aftertaste of self-congratulation. And then it happened. At the precise moment his confidence crested, the grand entrance doors, untouched since the evening began, swung open in ghostly silence. The effect was immediate. Not a gasp, not a word, but a collective breath held. The atmosphere didn't just shift, it snapped. Every murmur evaporated, sucked into the sudden void of sound. Heads turned with eerie synchronicity, from the interns nearest the door to Julian Mercer himself, now frozen mid-toast. There, standing in the halo of ambient lobby light, was a figure. For a beat, no one moved. Then reality caught up to vision. The room processed what should have been impossible. It was Dr. Camille Alden. She wasn't the fragile, bedridden woman of Julian's curated fiction. She wasn't cloistered away in silence. She was radiant, formidable. Her gown was a deep emerald velvet, regal and commanding, tailored to honor her 8-month pregnancy, not to hide it. It flowed over her belly like armor. Her dark hair was swept into a sleek chignon, exposing the elegant precision of her features. Her gaze moved across the crowd, calm, knowing, unshaken. She didn't look like a woman abandoned. She looked like a sovereign stepping into her throne room. But Camille wasn't alone. To her right stood Malcolm Hurst, chairman of Stratus Ventures. A titan in his late 60s, silver-haired, steely-eyed, a man whose mere glance could unravel hostile acquisitions. Malcolm never appeared at public functions. His domain was the boardroom. His presence here was an earthquake in a tuxedo. He hovered near Camille's elbow, not as a chaperone but as a guard. To her left stood the remainder of the board of directors. There stood Evelyn Shaw, the razor-sharp former CEO of a rival tech conglomerate, someone Julian had spent years persuading to join his board. Beside her, General Preston, a retired 4-star commander with a legendary reputation in logistics. And flanking them, Kenji Morita, the quiet yet commanding head of a Japanese investment house that controlled a substantial share of Stratus Ventures. None of them smiled, none looked remotely festive. They were not here for a celebration. They were here for a reckoning. Their faces were carved from the same stone, impassive, unyielding, severe. The image was damning. This wasn't a scorned wife staging a scene. It was a calculated, strategic ambush. A precise and devastating strike. Julian remained frozen on the small platform, still gripping Liana's hand. The color drained from his face, replaced by a blotchy, sickly pallor. His once proud grin had dissolved into slack-jawed disbelief in a heartbeat. His universe, the one he controlled so meticulously, was coming apart. All his power, his certainty, his illusion of invulnerability, gone in the steady gaze of the woman he had dismissed. His eyes bounced from Camille to Malcolm Hurst, and for the first time in a very long time, something unfamiliar bloomed in his chest. Fear. Cold, visceral, unmistakable. Liana, the would-be rising star, appeared to deflate beside him. The crimson silk of her dress now screamed instead of shimmered. Too loud, too cheap. The admiration that had once filled her eyes was rapidly being replaced with confusion. Then dread. She wasn't the star anymore. She was collateral, caught in a battle she never realized was unfolding. Her hand slipped from Julian's, damp with sweat. The silence was suffocating. The only sound came from the faint notes of ambient lobby music, a jarring contrast to the graveyard stillness that had fallen inside. Then Camille moved. Just one step, slow, deliberate. The click of her heel echoed across the ballroom like a verdict being read. She advanced, not with the awkward shuffle of late-stage pregnancy, but with the unflinching calm of authority incarnate. Malcolm and the board moved in unison beside her, a wall of power cutting a path through the stunned crowd. The guests parted instinctively, recoiling as if before royalty or wrath. City officials, influencers, executives, all lowered their gazes, desperate to avoid association with the man on the stage. Camille ignored them. Her focus was locked, precise. There was only one person she had come for, her husband. This was not about the mistress. Liana was merely a symptom, a side effect. Camille was there for the source. She had come to dismantle the disease itself. As Camille approached the stage, the entire narrative of the evening was upended in an instant. This was no longer Julian's night, no longer about his audacity or control. Now it was about Camille's arrival. And every person in the ballroom understood, with a clarity that froze their blood, that this wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of Julian's unraveling. The distance from the grand entrance to the foot of the platform felt to Julian like the final mile of a marathon he hadn't realized he was running. His breath, once easy and dominant, now came in shallow, panicked gasps. Camille stopped directly before him. She lifted her gaze. Though the platform gave Julian physical height, he had never felt smaller, never felt so utterly exposed. He forced a sound, half voice, half cough, a pitiful echo of the confidence he once wielded. "Camille, what is this? What are you doing here? You were supposed to be resting." His eyes darted to Malcolm Hurst, desperate for an anchor in a moment that felt like drowning. "Malcolm, what's going on? You're frightening everyone." Malcolm didn't blink. Instead, he stepped forward, inserting his presence between Camille and Julian like a curtain of unyielding power. His tone, when he finally spoke, had none of the cordial diplomacy of a chairman addressing his CEO. It was cold. It was personal. "Are you all right, my dear?" he asked, his voice laced with genuine concern, directed solely at Camille. She nodded once, calm and assured. "I'm perfectly fine, Uncle Malcolm. Thank you for asking." A wave of astonished whispers swept through the nearby guests. Those close enough to hear the exchange gasped softly. "Uncle Malcolm." The words detonated like a second bombshell. Julian's mind spiraled. He had known Camille had a godfather, an elusive Uncle Malcolm she rarely mentioned. A retired financier, she'd said, someone who quietly oversaw her family's modest estate. He remembered a brief meeting years ago, a handshake at a family holiday gathering, a forgettable moment. He had never, not once, connected that mild-mannered figure from Camille's past with Malcolm Hurst, the commanding chairman who controlled the fate of his company. And now, he realized he had spent years trying to win over a man who already knew everything. The board had known. Of course they had. And in that knowledge, their grim expressions now made chilling sense. This wasn't just corporate maneuvering. This was deeply, dangerously personal. They weren't merely backing a vote, they were backing blood. A member of the family. Malcolm turned his icy gaze back to Julian. The polite mask was gone. "Mercer," he said, the name striking the air like a shard of glass, "you seem to be operating under several false assumptions. The first," he continued, "is that you have any authority over where my goddaughter chooses to stand. And the second, far more important, is this illusion that your guest's comfort is our concern tonight." He swept a cold hand in the direction of the stunned crowd. "The party is over. On behalf of the board of directors of Stratus Ventures, I'm asking all non-essential personnel to exit the building immediately. Thank you for your service. Your cars are waiting." A long pause. Then the room erupted into frantic, breathless motion. No one needed a second prompt. It was a slow-motion stampede. Heels clattered, glasses fell, luxury fabrics rustled like dry leaves in a storm. The city's elite fled, desperate to escape the crossfire of a corporate execution. Within minutes, the ballroom was a hollow shell. All that remained were Julian and Liana, still frozen on the platform, and the quiet tribunal facing them. Camille, her hand now protectively resting on her stomach, stood with unshakable stillness. Behind her, the entire board of directors of Stratus Ventures. The once sparkling decorations and half-finished flutes of champagne now looked absurd, remnants of a celebration that had died in flames. Julian's fear gave way to something hotter, anger. Righteous, indignant, furious, the audacity to be ambushed, to be humiliated in his sanctuary. "This is madness," he hissed, voice trembling with rage. "You can't do this. This is my company, my event." He whipped toward Camille, his face contorted in disbelief and fury. "And you planned this circus? After everything I've given you? I told you to stay home." But Camille didn't flinch. She didn't meet him with the broken eyes of a betrayed wife. She looked at him like a physician observing a dying delusion, detached, precise. "You're mistaken, Julian," she said. Her voice was calm, measured, but edged in surgical steel. "You didn't give me anything. We were supposed to be partners. And as for home, my home lies where my family's legacy is protected, where our interests are upheld." She gently patted her belly. "My home is with this child, and with the inheritance my father entrusted to Uncle Malcolm to safeguard." She let the silence settle before delivering the final blow. "A legacy," she said coolly, "that includes a 12% founding stake in Stratus Ventures, held in a blind trust under my name." Julian's mouth opened, then closed. No sound came out. He looked like a fish gasping for oxygen on a marble deck. 12%, Camille repeated softly. Enough to make her the second largest individual shareholder in the company. He had always thought her family's money was old, irrelevant, some dusty lineage with no bearing on real power. Never once had it crossed his mind that it was embedded in the very architecture of his own success. Finally, Julian's panicked gaze landed on Liana, as if truly seeing her for the first time. She wasn't a symbol of his dominance anymore. She was a mirror reflecting the magnitude of his failure. She stood paralyzed, pale with dread, her expression a watercolor of shame and fear. Her scarlet dress now looked ridiculous, a cheap costume in a ballroom drained of color and meaning. Camille followed his gaze. Then, with a flick of her eyes, dismissed Liana like a failed audition. "This," Camille said, her voice smooth and sharp, "is what you were willing to destroy everything for? A girl playing make-believe? You didn't just underestimate me, Julian. You underestimated the entire foundation of your life." Her words cut through the still air, precise, unforgiving. She dismantled his pride with the elegance of a scalpel. The twist wasn't just that Malcolm was her godfather. It was that Camille had never been the passive spouse he assumed. She had always been a silent partner, a force. And now she was here to collect on what was hers. The emptiness of the ballroom was heavy. Every breath, every blink, every shift of weight echoed in the stillness. Julian's fury, which had burned so fiercely only moments ago, sputtered out against the glacial calm of Camille's resolve. He was collapsing under the gravity of his own ignorance. "A 12% stake," he gasped. The words caught, brittle in his throat. That's impossible. I vetted everything. I went through—" "You vetted," Camille interrupted, her tone chillingly even, "exactly what I allowed you to see. The trust was created by my father long before I ever met you. It was structured for discretion. You saw the institution, not the beneficiary. You were so absorbed in your own genius, it never occurred to you that my family might possess brilliance of its own." She stepped closer to the stage. Julian had to look down at her now. But all the height in the world couldn't lift him above her. "You saw Dr. Camille Alden," she said, "the academic, the supportive wife. You never thought to ask about the details of that modest trust that paid for my education at Yale in full. That let me support us while you were building apps in a basement and eating canned beans. That seed money, Julian, where did you think it came from? The sky?" Each question was a precise incision, dismantling the carefully crafted legend of the self-made man. Julian had rewritten their shared history, placing himself at its center, the lone visionary who dragged them both from obscurity to greatness. But Camille was here to correct the record. She hadn't been a passenger. She had paved the road. Julian's eyes darted around, searching for a way out, a crack in the fortress now encasing him. But there was no escape. The board stood like sentinels, their expressions stone cold. Judgment had already been passed. His panic turned vicious. He spun toward the only other target left. "Get out," he snarled at Liana, who recoiled as though struck. "This has nothing to do with you. Leave." Liana's eyes flicked between Julian's twisted expression and Camille's composed stare. She was a pawn, trapped in a game whose rules she had never understood. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. Instead, tears brimmed in her eyes. She gathered the hem of her crimson gown, turned, and fled. Her heels echoed in a frantic, syncopated rhythm until she vanished through a side exit, a ghost of Julian's greatest miscalculation. He didn't look after her. His attention was fixed, trembling on Camille. "So this is what it's about," he sneered, reaching for the only weapon he had left, narrative control. "Money. You find out you've got a little leverage and decide to stage this theater for a bigger slice of the pie? Is that it?" A faint, almost pitying smile ghosted across Camille's lips. "Divorce?" she echoed softly. "Oh, Julian, you're still 3 moves behind. A divorce is a negotiation between equals. You and I are no longer equals." It was then that Malcolm stepped forward, his voice a low, thunderous warning. "Mercer," he said with finality, "stop talking. You're compounding an already catastrophic situation." He glanced at Camille, a silent question in his eyes. She nodded once. It was time. "You see, Julian," Camille said, her tone now cooled to something clinical, dissecting. "Your affair. That was the spark, the humiliation you handed me in public. That was the trigger. But the betrayal," she continued, "that ran deeper. It wasn't the heartbreak, it was the insult, the idea that you thought I was too stupid to notice." She began to pace slowly before the stage, each step deliberate, her voice unflinching. "I started small. The client gifts that never hit official ledgers, the inexplicable offshore holding company in the Cayman Islands. You used to tell me I didn't understand your business, but I do understand patterns. I understand behavior. And yours, Julian, became erratic, desperate." Julian's face went stiff, pale, and brittle. This was no longer just about marital betrayal. It had crossed into dangerous territory, territory where legal consequences replaced broken hearts. "I didn't need to hire a private investigator to uncover Liana," Camille said, waving a hand dismissively. "A girl like that leaves a trail of digital breadcrumbs half the internet could follow." "No," she continued, her voice tightening. "I reserved my resources for something that mattered. I hired a team of forensic accountants, the best, people who can spot a missing decimal in a mountain of manipulated numbers." She stopped pacing, locked eyes with him. Those eyes, once captivating, now looked like loaded barrels aimed directly at his soul. "What I found, Julian," she said, "wasn't just infidelity. It was a full-scale symphony of fraud." General Preston, the logistics specialist on the board, cleared his throat. "Mercer," he said, "we have the preliminary report. It's comprehensive." Evelyn Shaw, the sharp-edged former CEO, chimed in with her signature bluntness. "Project Nightshade. Ring any bells?" Julian froze. His stomach dropped. His veins ran ice. Project Nightshade. The secret project he had buried so deep he was sure no one would ever find it. His desperate last hope. A bloated, hemorrhaging biotech startup that had never made it out of clinical proof. He had been funneling millions from Stratus Ventures to keep it afloat, betting everything that someday it would pay off, that it would be his legacy. It had become a black hole, and for the last year and a half, he had been illegally sustaining it through shell transfers and falsified records. He thought no one knew. I don't know what you're talking about," he mumbled, but it was a useless lie. The sweat crawling across his brow betrayed the truth. Camille's expression didn't change. She simply shook her head. "No more lies, Julian. It's over. We know everything. The shell companies, the fake invoices, the supplier kickbacks. We know you leveraged company assets for personal loans, without board knowledge, without shareholder disclosure." She let the words settle. The silence afterward felt like the final click of a cell door. "You didn't bring your mistress here tonight to flaunt your success," Camille continued, her voice calm but cutting. "You brought her because tomorrow morning you were scheduled to authorize the final wire transfer for Project Nightshade. You were going to drain the last of Stratus's accessible funds, vanish to a country without an extradition treaty, and leave the rest of us to clean up the mess." Her voice dropped into a whisper, thick with contempt, more lethal than any scream. "You weren't celebrating the future. You were celebrating your escape." And you just couldn't resist one last arrogant curtain call. You just couldn't help yourself, Camille said, her voice steady. You had to rub my nose in it. And that, Julian, she locked eyes with him, was your fatal mistake. The name Project Nightshade still hung in the air, like a poisonous vapor no one dared inhale. To Julian, it was the tolling of a funeral bell, his. The blood drained from his face, leaving behind a pallid, waxy sheen under the ballroom lights. He looked at Camille no longer as a partner, not even as a threat, but as a prosecutor delivering the final conclusive blow. Years of careful deceit unraveled in a matter of minutes. How? He croaked. A single word. Fragile. Gasping. How could you possibly know? Camille's expression remained untouched, scientific, clinical. You seem to forget, she replied, that before I was your wife, I was a behavioral economist. I build predictive models based on irrational human behavior. And your fatal flaw has always been predictable, Julian. Your ego. She gestured subtly toward a figure near the board. Michael Fong, the CFO, who had just re-entered the room. His face was grim, still, watchful. Michael and I have been in conversation for weeks. Julian's head snapped toward him. You? His voice cracked. You betrayed me? Michael adjusted his tie. His hands trembled faintly, but his voice, when it came, was solid. I have a fiduciary responsibility to this company and its shareholders, Mr. Mercer. My loyalty isn't to you, not when your personal actions threaten the very foundation of what we've built. Dr. Alden brought some irregularities to my attention. At first I doubted her, but the numbers, they don't lie. Camille resumed, her tones slicing clean. You always thought Michael was just a numbers man, a glorified accountant. You dismissed him. Just like you dismissed me. You assumed his fear of you outweighed his sense of ethics. But when presented with the full scope of your embezzlement, he made the right call. Malcolm Hurst stepped forward once again, a quiet force. From inside his tailored jacket he withdrew a slim, leather-bound folder. He didn't need to open it, the gesture was enough. The forensic report is conclusive, Malcolm said, his voice devoid of anything but finality. We have digital records of every transfer, from Stratus Ventures operating accounts to the shell entities propping up Project Nightshade. We have sworn affidavits from 2 vendors you pressured into the kickback scheme, Evelyn Shaw added coolly, her gaze razor-sharp. They were more than willing to cooperate, in exchange for immunity. And, she added with a touch of bitter amusement, we have Liana Dre. Julian blinked. Liana? She doesn't know anything about Stratus. She was never involved in any of the business. Oh, she knows more than you think, Evelyn replied with a cold, mirthless smile. Or rather, she has more than you think. Young, ambitious women who get involved with powerful married men tend to develop insurance policies. In her case, Camille interjected, it was a cloud backup of every single message, text, and email you ever sent her. Julian's thoughts spiraled. He tried to recall specifics, reckless boasts, veiled hints about the real project that would change everything, angry rants about the board. It all seemed harmless then. Flirtatious, arrogant, unfiltered. It's all circumstantial, he snapped. A final bluff from a man backed into a corner. It proves nothing, just chatter. It proves motive and mindset, Camille corrected, still composed. But you're right, it wasn't the smoking gun. That, she said, pausing for effect, came from you. Julian's body tensed. A gift, she continued. Do you remember a few weeks ago? You gave her a new laptop, top of the line, to help her with work. What you didn't know is that our IT department, under Mr. Fong's supervision, had already flagged you as a potential internal security risk. Michael stepped forward, voice stronger now. Every new device connected to the Stratus network is subject to an automatic security scan, especially when given inexplicably to a junior intern. On that laptop, he said, we discovered a hidden partitioned drive. And on that drive, Camille took the baton, her voice sharpened to a scalpel, was a single folder. Project Nightshade, the entire plan, the falsified funding documents, the true burn rate, and most importantly, your escape plan. A detailed outline of a new identity, a one-way flight itinerary to Bice, booked for tomorrow afternoon. The silence that followed was absolute. Checkmate. So perfect, so brutal, so complete. Julian couldn't move, couldn't speak. He had handed them the weapon, sharpened the blade, pointed to his own neck, and they had swung. The final, devastating blow didn't come from Camille, or Malcolm, or even Michael. It came from a voice Julian had long forgotten. Kenji Morita, the silent Japanese investor, spoke for the first time. His English was careful, accented, and deliberate. "Mr. Mercer," he said, bowing his head slightly but never breaking eye contact. "My firm invested in Stratus Ventures for its innovation, but also for its leadership. We were under the impression that leadership was a partnership between you and Dr. Alden. Her family's legacy, her presence, it was seen as a symbol of long-term stability." He paused, the weight of his words pressing down like stone. "Your actions are not only criminal, they are a dishonor." Julian flinched. Kenji turned to Camille. "My firm and the investors I represent have lost all confidence in your husband's ability to lead. But we have gained deep respect for your diligence, Dr. Alden, your integrity. We support the board's decision, fully." The declaration landed like a gavel. There was no debate, no cracks, no dissension. The board stood as a single, unyielding entity. Julian had no angles left, no tactics, no leverage. He'd been too busy chasing a petty, glamorous fantasy, obsessed with seducing interns and rewriting narratives. He never saw the real war, the one Camille had waged quietly, strategically. A war for the company, a war he had already lost. The weight of judgment pressed down on him, a physical thing. His knees faltered beneath it. The Tom Ford suit that once made him feel invincible now clung like a burial cloth. He scanned the room. Camille, calm and unshakable. Malcolm, righteous and still. The board, unreadable, unmerciful. No one pitied him. No one offered a hand. Only silence. Only the brutal finality of consequence. His once quick mind, always ready with a pivot or deflection, was now blank. White noise. Useless. Beasts. The flight. The fantasy of freedom. All of it, ashes in the fluorescent light of this impromptu tribunal. "So what now?" Julian finally asked. His voice, once so commanding, now barely above a whisper. It wasn't a challenge, it was a plea. A dethroned king staring up at the blade. "You call the SEC? The police? You drag the company's name and your own through the mud?" He looked at Camille. "Is that what you want?" It was pathetic. A last desperate appeal to shared damage. "Mutually assured destruction," Malcolm Hurst answered. His voice, granite. "There will be no spectacle, Mercer. Not if we can avoid it. The integrity of Stratus Ventures comes first. We have a responsibility to our employees and to our investors," Malcolm Hurst said, voice cool and deliberate. "A scandal of this magnitude would devastate them." He stepped forward, not with sympathy, but with authority, and raised a hand, cutting off the faint flicker of hope Julian dared to show. "Do not mistake our discretion for mercy. You have two options, Mercer. Both end with your complete and irreversible removal from this company." He gestured toward Elena Voss, the general counsel who had stood silent until now. Her expression unreadable, she stepped forward and placed a thin folder and a sleek pen on the stage's edge. "Option 1, Malcolm continued, "is the hard way. I make a single call, and within 10 minutes, detectives from the SEC's Financial Crimes Division will walk through that door. You will be arrested and charged with embezzlement, securities fraud, and half a dozen other white-collar felonies. You'll face a federal trial, likely spend the next decade behind bars. Stratus Ventures will issue a statement condemning your actions and fully cooperate with prosecutors. The company will survive, but bruised. Your name will live on as a punchline. A cautionary tale." Julian flinched. The word prison landed like a strike to the ribs. "Option 2, Malcolm said, voice dropping an octave, "is clean. In that folder is your immediate resignation as CEO and chairman. It includes a full transfer of your 28% stake in Stratus into the trust managed by Dr. Alden. Restitution for the money you stole." Julian's voice cracked. "That's my entire stake. That's everything." "It's a fraction," Evelyn Shaw snapped. "A fraction of what you tried to steal, and a pittance compared to what your arrogance has cost. If you sign," Malcolm continued, "you walk out that door tonight. We'll announce your early retirement tomorrow due to health reasons. Quietly, internally, we'll deal with Project Nightshade. No police, no prison, but no legacy. You'll be erased." Julian's eyes flicked from the folder to Camille. Her face was impassive, but in her eyes he saw something. Not hate, finality, a quiet, unshakable resolve. This wasn't revenge. It was balance. She wasn't just taking back control of Stratus. She was reclaiming her life, her safety, her child's future. Everything he had gambled away. It wasn't a real choice, a diminished life, or a cell. His ego shrieked, but his survival instinct, the only true god he had ever bowed to, spoke louder. Hands trembling, Julian Mercer dropped to his knees. The $1,000 wool of Julian's suit met the polished floor. It was the posture of a fallen monarch. He reached for the pen. His hand trembled so violently he could barely wrap his fingers around it. He uncapped it, opened the folder. The legal text blurred before his eyes. But he didn't need to read it. He knew. It was the formal dissolution of his world. With a hand that barely obeyed him, he scrawled his name, a signature that had once launched a billion-dollar enterprise, onto the resignation. Then again, on the share transfer. 2 strokes. That's all it took to go from kingmaker to exile. He shoved the folder away like it burned, stood stiffly, mechanically. He looked like a ghost of the man who had entered this ballroom in triumph. "It's done," he said. His voice was hollow. Malcolm Hurst gave a single nod, crisp, final. "Elena," he said. Elena Voss stepped forward, lifting the documents delicately, like evidence in a crime scene. "Julian," Malcolm said, using his first name for the last time, "you have 60 seconds to leave this building. Your security detail has been dismissed. Your company accounts are frozen. A taxi is waiting. You do not return to this office. You do not return to the residence. Your personal items will be shipped wherever you instruct. You are not to contact Dr. Alden or any employee of Stratus Ventures ever again. Are we clear?" Julian nodded, a single jerky movement. He looked once more at Camille, his wife, the mother of his child, the architect of his downfall. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but nothing came. There was nothing to say. He had sown chaos, and now at last he reaped it. He turned, not toward the main entrance, but toward the side door, Liana's door. The door for secrets, for shame. He didn't look back. The disgraced CEO vanished into shadow, leaving behind the empire he built and the woman he fatally misjudged. The door clicked shut behind him. Camille finally exhaled. A breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her hand instinctively moved to her belly, a gesture of quiet protection and promise. Silence settled over the room. The war was over. What came next was hers to write. Standing in the stillness, in the remnants of Julian's legacy, Camille Alden was not a victim seeking comfort. She was a leader, surveying the domain she had just reclaimed. The board, her silent partners in this audacious surgical coup, voted unanimously. She was their new CEO. As the interim CEO of Stratus Ventures, Camille Alden was no longer the woman behind the man. She had stepped from the shadows, no longer content to whisper into the ear of power. Now she was the voice, the presence, the cucumber. She was the Gother. Her pregnancy wasn't a hindrance. It was a deadline, a motivator to purge, rebuild, and craft a legacy of integrity for the child she carried. Each decision she made now was not just for shareholders or optics. It was a blueprint for Julian Mercer faded into a self-imposed exile. A man's strip. A whispered cautionary tale in boardrooms. The man who flew too close to the sun, who underestimated Camille, she weaponized it. Pain B. From the scorched proof that the best revenge isn't wrath, it's us. Thank you for joining us for this tale of ambition, betrayal, and poetic justice. If you were glued to your skier, what did you think of Camille's precision strike? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. For more twisted plots, shocking betrayals, and sweet strategic revenge, subscribe and ring that bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next. And don't forget to share this with someone who loves a good corporate drama. We'll see you in the next story.